right. You can let me know when we're live. All right. You can let me know when we're live.
Yep, we're good to go.
All right, cool. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Is someone giving feedback? Do we have any feedback coming through? All right.
Yes, we are live.
All right, great. Okay, so let's get started here. Welcome to the second Web Framework Group meeting. This is March 19th. So we have a couple of agenda items to get through today. I believe we'll do a similar thing as last time. Do we have does anyone have a amount of time we want to put for each item, hold ourselves to, or do we just want to sort of go with it?
I think we might want to go with it because some of them look like we might be fairly quick. It might just be looking at it and everybody nodding and saying, yeah, not much to do here.
Cool.
So my guess. I could be wrong.
All right, cool. Yeah, we can see. I'll keep in the back of my head, like maybe when we start reaching 15 minutes or more for a single item, I'll try to wrap it up so we don't spend too much time. But let's jump right into it. Our first agenda item is reviewing the governance. To summarize, we had a pull request that made updates to this since our last meeting. That's been merged. Is there anything else that needs to be done on this issue, or can we close this issue? I believe maybe the one thing that's outstanding is the meeting times, but I think we're going to try something new here. We have this time, and we have another meeting time that we're going to try and benefit everyone else's schedule. So we're going to be doing 2 meetings. Is it every other week or every other 2 weeks?
Bi-weekly, the version, not twice a week, but every other week, right?
Great. And then every other week is going to be a different time, so it could support more people.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so the next
like we
meeting,
discussed,
just to be clear, the next meeting will be, let me just pull up my calendar just so that we're all aligned on that. Will be on April 2nd. And so that, I think if I remember correctly, we picked, was it 10 a.m. PST? We can look, and I'll be sure to post the issue for that much sooner. Michael, I did take a look last night again at automation there. Maybe we can just set up a time to do a quick hangout or call, and you can walk me through getting that set up.
Yeah, no, if you say, just send an invite. I can help you do it. It's pretty simple, but I can see how you might want somebody to say, yeah, this is what matters or not. So.
Okay.
Cool.
It shows on the calendar as 1 Eastern, which subtracting 3 hours, I think is 9.
10?
10.
It is 10
Pacific. Yeah.
Cool.
And that good. So the one last thing is on there. I think that's all. The next issue is what I wanted to discuss next. So is there anything more about governance? And we can close this issue.
So I think we can close issue number 1. There is related to governance is the join instructions. Oh, but I guess that's on here. Okay, yeah, good. Cool.
Exactly. So I'm going to close this issue and we'll move on to the next one, which is join instructions in the README. So this is a pull request. Wes, you authored this one. We got some good feedback. I believe there is an outstanding comment just to update one of the sections to link to the new governance doc. So once that is done, I believe that part will be completed.
Yeah, so I can take a look at making the last changes here today. One of the things that was outstanding here was just getting that automation in place as well, wasn't it? Or I guess we said we just can do that manually for now. So I guess there's one request that's open that we should take care of. Oh, I guess there's a few because there's the issues, which was the old way. But I assume nobody has any problem with just me going through and adding everybody who is currently on an open membership request.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason not to accept them
Cool.
at this point in time.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and do that today. So I'll get everybody added to the team, and I'll get that PR updated, and then we can merge that. Great. I don't know if
Cool. Was there? Yeah, well, there was going to be the question of, do we have the policy in there? Like, I know we're going to accept everyone up till now, but when is that going to change to more of a like, more of a like a group decision or a process?
Yeah, so that is what's documented in here, but it's not. It's very loose. It's the same kind of thing we were doing and have been doing on the package maintenance working group side, which is basically let everybody come and join. We might do bulk team additions, like once people have actually, participated a little bit and not just submitted the PR and never commented or attended a meeting, but pretty loose, like basically anybody who wants to join can. And then the governance additions that Guy added, which I think got merged in 58, I think it was, have the 6-month review thing where it just like make sure that we don't leave a bunch of people on there for years without them actually participating in the team.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
I'm in favor of letting it loose for the time being. That is encouraging as many folks to attend rather than defining any restrictions or any review as such. Problem of plenty is something which we can easily deal with. If the number of folks in this team grows beyond uncontrollable limits, maybe at that point in time we could actually think about defining some restrictions or some criteria for enrolling. But I don't think it's a problem at this point. That's my view.
That's a great input. I believe you're right. We should keep welcoming individuals. I hope that with the various meeting times, we can continue to support more and more people to attend, and so we can see how that shapes up over time.
Yep, makes sense.
Great. So I will leave that one open because it requires one last change, and then we'll be able to merge that. And we'll probably request reviews on this PR so we can get consensus there.
Once I make the change, I'll just ping the team.
Wonderful. If there's anything else on this one, we can move right on to one of the more meatier issues for today. Great. All right. So on to the next one. This is issue number 19, Stream versus Request API. I'll read the first comment, and then I'll let Wes come in because I believe he has some replies here.
Is Robert not on the call? Robert said he couldn't attend, maybe?
Yeah, I do not see Robert on today. So let's, Robert replied, in HTTP 2, we got a new API for handling requests where instead of emitting a request event with a request and response object, we emit stream with a stream object. And then he posted some bullet point questions. Is the ecosystem interested in moving towards this API? What are the advantages, disadvantages? And how can we help with this transition? Would a forwards compat layer be possible, helpful, make sense? And I'll give it to Wes to expand on this issue.
Yeah, so as I kind of said in here, I mean, we don't really have a choice since HTTP 2 and 3 are moving a little bit more in this direction. Actually, Tomas, have you worked on the Fastify side of this, I feel like? Am I correct there?
Yes. So we added the support for HTTP 2 in Fastify, but only with the compat API. We didn't do anything with the stream event because it was way easier for us working on with the compatibility API. Plus, we are kind of waiting to see how the HTTP 3 API will evolve and then decide how can we continue about this.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I talked a little bit about the HTTP 3 stuff. I mean, we as the frameworks could start adopting that now and building out support. It'd just be, on experimental node lines. And in fact, just last night we had the Express TC meeting, and and then I did some of the work after that to move our request and response out of the main repo, which is our first step toward directly supporting HTTP 2 and 3, probably first like you do via the compat layer. But then very soon, hopefully, we'd like to start work on the more robust support, the less easy stuff, which is seeing what it actually looks like for a developer to write an application fully utilizing HTTP 3 and 2, but we kind of want to focus on 3 since that's the future. What that even looks like, right? Like I don't know if a lot of I've sort of asked for people to give examples of HTTP 2 and 3 applications, and folks don't even have them.
Yes, I can confirm this. We asked around via Twitter or other channels, and we didn't see any nice or good example of HTTP being used in production right now. Also, same thing for the examples. So the best example I can give for example, for Fastify HTTP2 is our testing framework. That's the biggest HTTP tool I can show you right now. But yes, I think then definitely one of the main goal will be try to figure out API that will allow us to have almost the same code base to support both HTTP 1, 2, and 3 in the future. Otherwise, you will end up having 3 different frameworks, which is not ideal.
Or maybe even worse is 3 different implementations inside the same framework, and every single, and in Express's case, middleware would have to test, is this an HTTP 1, 2, or 3 request response, which would just be a nightmare for everyone. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just wondering, I just had a question, like, do you think that we're not seeing like use cases because people are using HTTP2 but terminating at like an Nginx proxy, or is it something else?
Tomas?
I will bet for the second. So a lot of people are using Nginx in the middle, but other than that, I don't have enough data to answer you.
That's my experience too. The folks that are using HTTP2 at Netflix are using it over gRPC. So that sort of changes the story a bit. But other than that, yeah, they're all terminating at a load balancer or, Nginx layer.
And does that mean that they can't take advantage of some options they could if they went all the way to the framework, or? Yeah,
so the last time I did a deep dive on this, so it could be different now that Nginx has had some turbulence, is they didn't support a reverse HTTP 2 proxy in anything but their paid platform. And obviously that's fairly uncommon. Most folks aren't using Nginx Plus, so they're not taking advantage of it. And what that means is that you can't even do application layer things like server push, right? All of the multiplexing stuff is terminated at your Nginx layer, so you're not even going to start an HTTP2 server in Node at all. You're just going to end up treating it like it was an HTTP 1 application.
Right. Okay.
So I have to say, though, I really think that a spectacular example with GraphQL and HTTP 3 would probably be a game changer for folks, right? So if you could do some of these GraphQL queries across, the multiple requests, but with some push from the server side, right? Where they could say, oh, we know you have these edges that you're probably going to want. Let's push those down over a GraphQL API and not look at it so much from the REST perspective. I think that could probably really get people on board with what these new style of application layers might look like and what they would enable. I think REST today is pretty well founded. I think people see REST and go, well, yeah, I don't really need to do HTTP 2 or 3 there. Everything's working just fine. The folks who are hitting boundaries there are going to GraphQL, and it actually does resolve some of those issues because you're hopefully not going to do 20 requests on a single page, right?
Something I want to follow up with is this sounds like a somewhat, maybe the issue is less so that people, I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons why people aren't using HTTP2, as you just listed with the engine, the Nginx stuff and more. But what if it's maybe a lack of educational resources? Like maybe we need more blog posts or more better documentation, more guides on setting these things up like through and through, and showing things all the way from like a browser, like progressive web app kind of front end, all the way to like the back end, and showing that whole HTTP2 thing. Because to be honest, I don't even know where to start with that stuff. I've heard of it, I've watched a lot about it, but I would not know how to build an HTTP2 application. But HTTP1, that's a lot more doable. So maybe that's the reason why it's not getting adopted as well.
I think it would also have to be, and what benefits, what problems does it solve for you, right? Because back to Wes's point, like if there's not really a problem, say with, you know, serving a REST API with the current version, maybe there isn't a motivation, right? But it's bringing out like, okay, here's what you're going to get by moving to HTTP2.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of, so I agree, we need more educational resources, but unless those educational resources can hit on this point, like me personally, I'm not going to go out of my way to make an HTTP 2 or 3 application unless my product is going to really benefit. And I'm not building a lot of products that would benefit more than they already are from terminating at the Nginx layer, right? Like my application code is not going to suddenly be more maintainable or provably faster, or, you know, any of these things where, you know, you typically pick up a new technology or a new, you know, pattern.
I want to take a moment to bring this back a little bit to the issue at hand, though, and that is the stream versus request API. And obviously, we're not like the stream API comes from the HTTP2 and 3 and future implementations. And I believe the issue here is the adoption of it. And I want to try to summarize is the reason why a lot of the front end web frameworks, back end web frameworks are not adopting this stream API and stuff. Is it all because of these root issues along the lines of HTTP2 just isn't being used in the wild, and as a result, there's no need to put in that work on the web framework levels if no one's using it? Is that a good summary, or are we off there?
That might be a slightly different question, in that if it's the direction for the future, there's still value in starting to experiment and have the APIs people can start to learn with, even if immediately it's not necessarily going to mean that, you know, they switch to HTTP2 or get some great benefits. But if it's going to be what you have to use in HTTP 3 or 4 or 5, that seems different to me, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree. I think there's a bit of a build it and they will come thing at the framework level. At Node core level, I don't think that's the case because, you know, let's be honest, that's why we have all these great frameworks, because nobody's using that to build a production application. Nobody's using just the core Node APIs to build production level applications, at least not, you know, commonly. So I do think we need to be thinking about this future. That said, the speed at which we do it, I think, should be, you know, unless we have people who are raring to go on it and ready to commit all the time and effort into making an application, seeing where it breaks down with the, you know, current frameworks, and then can make some solid suggestions for an improved API experience. You know, I'm not the one signing up to do that right now, right? Like, and nobody on the Express team has either, because we again are looking at it going, well, what are our applications going to gain here? And it doesn't seem to be all that much. I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing is to get people to stop complaining that Express doesn't support HTTP2, which is like not a really good reason, right? I mean, so.
And I think Thomas can speak to Fastify has a similar position where we're not, no one's bugging us to implement stream APIs, and even if they were, if it's not within our own scope and our own development capacity, then it's just going to keep getting it's just going to keep sitting on the docket.
Yes, absolutely. As far as I remember, I never saw any issue about this. And the only plugin I saw built was by Google, the auto push plugin. It was for sending data to the browser, but other than that, I didn't see any more movement around it.
Well, so maybe that's a good place to start. Do you know who wrote that plugin?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay, because maybe we can reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to come to or post in the issue and tell us how they're using it. And if we can get a good use case where we see somebody utilizing it well, we can build off that. I mean, if I have had even one example, I'd probably be willing to spend the time to at least get the baseline support nailed down.
Another avenue is, do we have any good Cloudflare contacts? Because I know they do a lot of pretty like cutting edge web stuff, and they might know some things or know some applications in the wild that they could share with us.
That's a good point. I have one friend who I'm pretty sure still works there. I'll reach out, but I don't think he's working on this kind of stuff. He might be. I don't know. Maybe he knows somebody inside.
I shared in the chat the two links. Sorry, I shared in the chat the two links. The one is the Fastify package, and the other one is the underlying package from Google.
I was going to add two things. One, Wes, if that doesn't pan out, let me know, because I know there's been some people at some of the conferences that we could probably find and reach out to from Cloudflare. The other thing I'm wondering is, like, is this an opportunity to, I don't know if it's a standard but like to write down an API that then could be implemented in the same way by the different frameworks? Because one of the challenges is if the API is different in every framework, then you've got something different to learn, and it's harder to sort of there's some advantages to having the same different implementations of the same API versus different APIs as well.
So my opinion on this is that it is probably too early to say what the right API is. So if we spend a lot of time trying to design the perfect API without having much in the field experience or use cases, we'll more likely get it wrong. I think so to that point, it's better to get it wrong in a bunch of different ways, experimentally, and then sort of come together again and say, look, here's what we learned from doing it these 7 wrong ways, which I think is the sort of the Node ecosystem's tendency. So it aligns well there. Personally, that's my thing.
Sure.
I'd be happy to participate in the conversation as it's ongoing.
So I wanted to ask a question and then maybe make an observation. The first question is, do we know if HTTP3 is going to have a compat layer like HTTP2 does, or is it all going to be entirely streams? Does anyone know that?
I don't. I wonder, we can ask James.
Yeah, he's probably got the best idea, although I've only seen work on Quick versus HTTP3. And
no, I think he has both. I mean, Quick is underlying, right? So at his presentation in Montreal, I'm pretty sure he demoed some HTTP3 work.
Okay, I
could be wrong.
I could be wrong just as equally, but my sense was that it was like, okay, we're just building Quick, which will happen to be part of HTTP3, but we don't know what HTTP3 is going to look like yet. It was kind of that,
but that is also
he'll be able to comment.
This question is, I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, so like if 3 is going to be entirely streams, we're not going to get a compat layer, right? The question for me is, should we go back and put a streams layer over or an addition to for one, right? That way, you know, there's a consistent approach to it through all of the layers.
That'd be an interesting ask. I'm not sure how all of the semantics would translate to do an HTTP1 stream interface. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I haven't explored that.
Yeah, just very off the top of my head, it shouldn't be that hard, right? Just make it emit a stream, and then the stream emits requests as they come in. But I don't know enough about it. I'm sure there's a lot more.
Well, so there's a difference, right? The stream in the HTTP3 context is a single client. So in HTTP1, there's never multiple requests over the same connection on from a single client, right? It's individual connections. There might be TCP keep alive and stuff or whatever, but like, but it has a distinct start and end, right? Whereas in quick HTTP3 land, there's state that is kept that helps you do things across effectively multiple requests, but it's a slightly different paradigm.
Sure.
So I guess if you simplified it down to turning one request cycle into a single response, maybe, but then you wouldn't see, so then you would have to disable all of the features that you get out of the stream interface, right? So all of the performance things you can do, all the state you can keep, all that stuff wouldn't be available in HTTP1. So you'd either have to disable those methods, make them no ops, or error. But in an error case, that's just like why, that's, then you're back to this point of I have to know whether it's HTTP 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah. I want to quickly mention that we're running a little bit close to like the time budget for this issue. So let's try and put together maybe some action items going forward. We can break this off into a further discussion or an issue.
I don't know what action items are. Should we? Oh, action items are. We do know what we just identified them. Reach out to folks at Google and Cloudflare to see what experience they have doing HTTP2 applications, and then reach out to James, which he said he might try to participate in this. I wonder if it's just since it's the 6 a.m. one, he wouldn't be able to attend. But
a bit early for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's out here with me, I think, and am I the only West Coaster on the call?
You're making a great. It's very dedicated. That's what I meant to say.
Hey, better than the first meeting when I woke up halfway through.
Well, that's still pretty dedicated anyway.
Cool. So we have reach out to Cloudflare and Google. Reach out to James. We can, I think that was a great discussion, Glenn. You started on the ideas of like, if HTTP3 is only going to be stream-based, like what do we need to do there? So maybe some more research into like, what is HTTP3 going to look like more on the application layer or maybe the framework layer? Like, how do we have to support that?
Yeah, or even the other side of that is, does someone need to provide a compat layer for HTTP3, right? Making it consistent across all 1, 2, and 3, and 4 and 5 is in my opinion, the best goal.
I just wonder, like, eventually you've got to drop the compat layer. Like, it was done so that you can move to 2, you could get some of HTTP2 while still using the API, but eventually that's going to break down. When you're at HTTP 10, I just can't see that you're going to have a compat layer all the way back to 1, right?
Yes.
I think it's seen more as a bridge. So that's, should we make a compat layer to the other way? Like, should we implement streams with 1? It's like, I guess, that is interesting for the same argument I've just made, is like maybe Node should move eventually to something else, right? But the argument, I guess, would be, well, it is there. You just need to move up to 2, right? And I think.
But again, that implies a whole ton of stuff, right? Because that implies that you have reverse proxies all the way through your stack back. There's a ton. This is why it's so complicated,
right?
Because even if we say, oh, we've got this great compat layer, and nobody can use it, like.
Right.
because of some other mitigating, infrastructure issue, then like, why do we build a great compat layer? So.
All right, so I'm gonna say we have a great little list of action items. I'm also gonna throw in there that I'm gonna reach out through some internal Microsoft threads that I'm a part of and see if I can get any context to see if HTTP 2 and 3 or whatever is being used at Microsoft. I imagine it is. Just gotta find those people. But let's move this conversation into the issue, and we can revisit it. We can keep it on the agenda, and we'll revisit it next time. So if everyone's okay with that, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. All right. So the next agenda item is the improved. All right. Have a good one, Thomas. Thank you very much. So the next agenda item is going to be the improved set header and set cookie. This one is by Wes, so I can let you explain it, and we can go into a discussion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So so this is sort of related to the other one that I opened, which is what if we being sort of a loose definition here, took over some of these low-level HTTP implementation detail packages. And I say packages, maybe it means up-level them to Node Core APIs. Maybe it could mean a lot of things. So I don't want to limit what we think it could do. But I thought one of the things that is problematic today in Express's cookie module is the limitation, the way that the Node Core APIs work. If you set the header, it overrides the previous header value. So let me see if I'm just, I got a link out here that talks about why this. So I don't know if anybody clicked through on this to look at the issue in the cookie module.
I did not get to read that far, but I'm pulling it up now.
I'm just pulling it up just because I haven't actually looked at this in a week or so.
What's the issue number, please?
So it's here. Let me post the link in the.
I got it.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I was too slow.
For those that are wondering, that this is the link to the underlying issue that is captured in Wes's issue on the web server framework.
Mm-hmm. So basically, what a lot of folks want to do, and I think is a very valid ask, is set multiple cookies at once, right? Seems pretty straightforward. Well, it's not. And if we had a better way to, and so basically it comes down to if we had an API that could set multiple cookies in Node, it would mean that this package doesn't have to worry about it, and it would resolve this issue in that we could rely on the core implementation instead of having to add complexity and maintain it in that library. Does that kind of make sense to folks?
So you believe that maybe this is a good first thing that the web server framework group could try and sort of help, what's it called, standardize maybe between frameworks, is make a cookie or contribute, maintain a cookie library that helps makes this process easier overall?
So that is definitely one way we could approach this problem. And I think it's actually a pretty good way. I kind of see some of these lower level HTTP things going in almost every single web app, like kind of justifies pulling it into core.
Okay.
I understand why, and if anybody disagrees with me, I can be my own devil's advocate here, which is to say that small core is better. Not every single web application in the entire world needs cookies. Therefore, don't put cookies in core. But if we made that argument, we could probably make that argument for tons of things that have made it into Node Core, and they're still valuable APIs, right? Like, not every CLI I've ever written uses make derp recursive. but like it's damn valuable when you have it.
Yeah.
So I would just expand it slightly and say, let's make it a more generic, well, let's make it both cookies, but also use that work to make it a generic header handler, right? Almost all the headers have kind of a standard layout, a standard parsing structure. And we could use that as the base, then build the cookie piece, which is slightly different on top of that, right? So that all of these headers could benefit from that thing. And I actually agree, this is something we should be thinking about, presenting or suggesting moving into core, because it is not necessarily super clear.
Mhm. Yeah, I
I
think
really
so.
like
That's sort of where I'm going with. I have it's sort of two options here. One is if we added append header, so that could be just its own independent, outcome here is we add an append header method that does what we need for the set cookie case. And then we could do a separate initiative to look at what bringing a cookie parsing implementation into core that would build, a set cookie. It's not even a cookie parser for this. This particularly is setting a cookie header, right? Which requires a serializer to that format.
So I'm suggesting maybe we expand it to include that other side, the parsing side.
Mhm.
Which that is also, I think, a valid thing. Maybe we can put out 3 separate things from this. So we do an append header issue and start discussion there. We do a set cookie header discussion, and then we do one on cookie parsing.
Or header parsing in general.
Well, so it specifically matters here, right? You can't, header parsing is not a generic problem. Cookies are parsed differently from a X forwarded for header, right? So we need.
Actually, I would argue that most headers do have a common structure. Most of them are just values, but there are some edge cases, or not as many as you think, but there are some cases that have more extended syntax like cookie does. But they're all pretty much the same. Cookie is slightly different in that the first parameter is both the key and the value of the cookie, but then it has a bunch of options, right? But if you look at like content type, the first value is the MIME type, and then there's an encoding value that goes along with it, and a boundary value. But those are also follow that kind of cookie pattern.
Kind of.
Saying,
I understand where you're going, and I'm definitely not opposed to thinking about how we bring all the important header parsing things in. Have you looked at what JS HTTP's org and all of the code in there for these different headers are? So most of the common userland implementations live in the JS HTTP org, which is one of the Express orgs.
Mhm.
I would take a look there and see, because I went through all of this code many times, and there's less commonality than I think you might be thinking. And also it can get really complicated really fast. So we should be careful about how much we bite off in any one go there, because just looking at these in the JSHTTP org, I think it's quite clear that any one of these is, tons of work maintenance wise, has a ton of security concerns, and if we were to pull it into Node Core, would be a non-trivial effort. Not to say that we shouldn't do it. I really like the idea of doing it. I just want to make sure that we don't try to do it like, wow, let's take them all and get them all in at once, because I think that's just gonna not fly.
Sure. I think I'm just advocating for at least considering what that looks like, right?
Sure.
And I think
Cool.
your point
We
of
have
looking
full
at the
agreement
JS
on that.
HTTP stuff is valid. But just my initial glance through the list of all of the possible headers kind of says there is a pattern there. So worth looking into.
Yeah, cool. I agree. We should definitely consider those.
So I like the idea of breaking them down a little bit, maybe into 2 or 3 things. Do we want to make the action item to break this apart into 3 different things, create issues for them, and see where they go?
Yep. I have breakaways already listed in here in the write-up, so we can definitely do that. I wanted to also mention that this sounds a lot like the discussions I believe they had around the Path API, and like the fact that some people felt like Node.js shouldn't care about pathing and stuff, and that we should leave that to like user land. But then they went ahead and made like tremendous improvements to the core Path API, and now you don't even need things like query string parsing and stuff like libraries. It's just all by default in Node.
Oh, you're the URL API is what you're.
Sorry, yeah, URL API. My bad. Yep.
No, totally. I just want to make sure I was understanding which piece you were talking about.
Yeah. So I feel like it's almost the same thing where maybe we can look back on a little bit of the history where it's like, let's see how the URL API evolved. I definitely was not able to, I don't know enough granular detail from Node major version to major version, but it'd be cool to see how that all goes through, and maybe that will give us some context for how we should bring this up to Node Core, and see what we can do. But Glenn, you provide great input on the general header stuff too.
Oh, never mind.
Michael, did you have something?
I was just going to ask you to promote Ronag, but I see you already did.
Yep.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
On this topic, my other thought was though, like I think if the goal is to get more things on the HTTP front into core, getting some of this group involved in helping to maintain HTTP in core would actually be a thing to do in parallel with all the other work, because we don't have a large number of people who are, on the HTTP maintenance front. As you mentioned, it's actually one of the areas we see security vulnerabilities. And I'm just thinking that, if the group comes along and says, hey, here's a bunch more stuff we want to get in, today it would, I think that might be a challenge. Whereas if, a couple people have gotten involved and start help maintaining what's already there, it'll be a much easier conversation.
I like that. I definitely, it's a good action right there.
Yeah. So this is one of the questions that I posed in a little bit with the governance was, do we want to seek a charter for that? Or some part of that, right? Like if there was some parts where we could say, yeah, there's this matters a lot to the web server frameworks, we should help own it. And I think the initial answer was let's wait. But I do think what do you, maybe my question there is, what do you think we could do to help those people who are able to and want to step up to do that?
So I think a very concrete thing would be, one of the challenges we have is that like security vulnerabilities are, we can't just put them into the regular repo and allow anybody to jump in and help. But I think if members of this team and, people who are helping to maintain the frameworks would be excellent candidates to say, oh, we're going to add you to the security team where we can give you access to the private repo. When we have, security reports on HTTP2, you're there to be able to help actually change the code, comment, review, because actually the changes are being made may directly affect the framework. So, both in terms of having the skill to help create the PRs for the fixes, plus also validating that it's not going to affect the ecosystem, that would be something we could do that I think would be beneficial for everybody.
Awesome. So I'm not in that. I believe that Doug Wilson is.
I think, yeah. So I think he's been added as like somebody we could consult. This, I think in this case we'd be looking for people who are like gonna actually, we've got a problem. Okay, actually have cycles to help create the PR, for example.
Yeah.
In addition to reviewing would be.
So I think this is great. I think one of my takeaways from this is I'll look around in my network and see if there's anybody who I can volunteer for that today.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
But I think we should definitely put the call out that we're looking for folks who can help with this area. And then maybe document that we have a future plan to expand the APIs and offerings in core, but those plans depend on having folks signed up to help maintain them, or
Right.
something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, people can already get active in the community issues, but that's a concrete one. So if we can find some volunteers, I'll take, once we have those volunteers, I can take the action to, have the discussions at the TSC level and do whatever we need to do to get them access.
I imagine I can
Sweet.
find some Netflix folks who'd be willing to do this. So
Okay.
Yeah, I think another big thing here is we should make use of the OpenJS Foundation's like network and the Node network, and just try and see what we can get. See if there's people that have been interested in contributing, and this might be a great opportunity where we're trying to really hone in on that, and
Right.
help facilitate it some more. And for
There's
those
two,
of us,
there's two
Go ahead.
pieces to that. One in the public issues, that's probably good. In the giving people access to the private repos, it will be people that we know have been like, if people have been actively contributing and been maintaining Fastify or Express, I think it'll be easier to say, yeah, okay, we can bring them into that circle of trust. If it's somebody who we've never seen before, it's going to be a lot harder.
yeah, that's kind of why I'm saying I mean, we have Restify maintainers who I think would be very good additions in this particular case. So I think they would be a good first go. I would not be surprised to hear that some of them have already been involved in that in the past. So,
well, it sounds like we've reached a good point on this issue. It's I'll summarize, and I think we should move on to our last agenda item. The summary is we need to break away some of the things here for the header and cookie things. Basically, how specific do we want those implementations kind of deal, and can they be in core? What does it mean for them to be in core? And on top of that, we need to consider the fact that we should not just be handing more work to an already small group of maintaining HTTP related things in core. So if we're going to bring this up, and if we're going to approach the idea of putting these things into core rather than in another module, or contributing up to another module, then we need to probably start providing some volunteers that will will start contributing and maintaining HTTP in core. So we've captured that, and we can put some of those into this issue, call out some new issues, and we can discuss this at the next agenda. Does that sound good with everybody?
It sounds good. I would just add the very specific action to, for each of the groups, and Wes has agreed to do it for Restify, but like for each of the frameworks, for people to think if there's anybody who could step up to, be added into the team that's going to help with HTTP security vulnerabilities in core.
Okay.
Because I think that's a really good concrete thing that would actually, it brings the groups together as a good step.
Okay, cool. I capture that in the notes, so we can rework that into the subsequent issues.
Perfect.
Okay, let's go into discussing modules in CITGM. Does anyone have a fun way to pronounce that abbreviation?
I just say CITGM, but
CITGM. All right, cool.
I say that too, but that is not how I initially, when I read this, before I knew how other folks were pronouncing it, I just said it full out every time, canary in the gold mine, because I'm like,
yeah.
I have no idea how to pronounce this acronym.
All right, well, canary in the gold mine. So I'll read this issue header because it's quite short. It is, on the Express DC meeting, we discussed testing for our dependencies, especially for V5, and we're thinking we need a better way to integrate groups of modules to canary in the gold mine. What do other frameworks do for this? I wanted to make a quick comment, and that's why I elected to read it and letting Wes say, is that I recently saw on Twitter someone posted a library that would run the unit tests for each of your NPM dependencies. And I wonder if anyone remembers what that was, and if that is this sort of thing that you're thinking of here, Wes, or if it's different.
So I also saw that, and I swear I started on GitHub, so I'm gonna go look through my stars. It is not exactly what I was thinking of.
Cool.
That
so
is
we
what
have-
Sigim is, right?
What was that? Sorry.
That's what Sigim is as well.
Slight
guess
difference
it's-
in details. So this particular module would find all of your direct dependencies in a package JSON and go clone them and run their unit tests. SitGym just has its own manifest of a top level.
Right. Okay.
So technically you could implement SitGym with this module.
Right.
Right. But that's the subtle difference. So there's a few aspects here, and I think Jaresh called some of this out. So there's the ability to introduce a module into the test suite. So this is open. You can submit a PR to the SitGym repo today. I've done it for, I think I did it for body parser. We've got a bunch of Express things in there. Part of it is, as we make new ones, you know, it's sort of hard to remember what to do. You know, like just last night I made this, I pulled the request out. It's got its own set of tests. If we're not testing that in SitGym, because SitGym is only testing the top level Express package. I mean, not only, but you know, for our intents here. So like one of the things Doug did for the serve static module, because that was not a part of the SitGym tests, was he pulled those tests into Express so that they got tested there, which is sort of a bad solution, right? Because now it has like two copies of those tests, one in Express and one in serve static. So that's sort of that. But I think, you know, that the maybe obvious answer there is just go submit a PR to serve static, or to add serve static. But I think there was some pushback on what modules get included. I don't know if anybody has any context on how the decision gets made on whether or not it makes it, but
I think it needs to be like, you can't just submit any module. There has to be a case that this is important for the larger ecosystem, right? But if it's like a core piece of Express, you know, Express and a small number of dependencies seems reasonable to me. Now, I'm not in the group that actually actively looks at that, so maybe I can't speak for them. But the other aspect that came to mind is like the testing. Okay, adding the tests from the dependencies may not make sense, but adding tests to Express which exercise the parts of Express that use those dependencies does.
Yeah, I think his concern was, you know, and I would, you know, I asked if he'd be able to make it. I think it's even too early, or he had to work or something. I don't know. But so I'm going to try to represent what he was saying. And I'm sorry, Doug, if you listen to this and don't think it well. But basically, these are parts that are exposed, but having the tests that more deeply test serve static functionality in a way that might break based on nodes behavior was more robust than just testing lightly does what Express exposes from serve static work, right? So it's kind of like, do you test your dependencies? Sort of the theory is no, you don't test your dependencies. You rely on their tests to test themselves, right? And I think that's what he was saying, why he didn't like pulling them over in the way that he did.
Yeah, I guess the node testing is a bit different.
Right, that's part of the.
Is that we're testing the node
the problem
versions. Yeah.
But isn't it possible that just the way Node runs a number of modules in the SitGym, Express being just a layer on top of that, maybe it's fair to expect that a number of modules which depend on Express is also being run by making use of the particular version of Express which we feed in. For example, in this particular use case, we want Express beta or Express 5.0 candidate to be tested against a number of modules which depend on that, and see how it is faring. So given that Express is so fundamental and stay close in the stack near to the Node.js, probably the SIGIM can be organized or visualized in such a manner that there is a hierarchy of modules, and the
Sorry,
one which we pick choose,
I got to
the
drop
one
off.
we
Bye.
pick choose is actually made use for the rest of the modules, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would be the implementation details that we would have to do behind that?
Yeah, at this point, I'm sure, or my gut feeling is that it's not that way. It is like a plain array of modules which can directly run on Node.js, and their test suites, which are dictated by the package.json itself, being tested independently without the modules that depend on the Express being cascaded or stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that doesn't solve our particular use case.
Yep. So so since Michael dropped, it just made me look at the clock and we're over. Could we maybe, Dresh, could you post maybe, well, let's see, you kind of posted a little bit. You just asked questions though. Do you have, would you be able to do a small, just synopsis of what you were thinking there? And then we can follow up in the issue and bring it up again on one of the next meetings?
Sure, I can do that. This is definitely not my interpretation of what Doug has been saying, or not your view. It's my own view.
Yeah, yeah, which is great. That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think maybe we should probably wrap it up, right?
Yeah, this sounds good. Next week, I'll try better to get us onto that 10 or sorry, 1 hour zone. But this was wonderful. We have some good action items. The recording will be available on YouTube afterwards. So we can share that out, and we're gonna have, so the next meeting is in 2 weeks, if I'm wrong, or is it next week?
No, 2 weeks, and then it'll be at 3 hours later, or 4 hours later. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. So let's we can announce that. We'll get a little bit ahead of this time, and I'm looking forward to our next meeting. Revisit a couple of these agenda items. So, all right, everyone, thank you very much for coming today. See you all next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wes.